This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Ben Rochestner and the occasional pop-in Sebastian Romero. On this week's Weigh-In, we talk to you about, if you missed it, well, we're going to talk about it. UFC, Israel Adesanya versus Joe Pyfer. And we're back again at the same question. Is Israel Adesanya's career done? We've got ourselves back there again, but nonetheless, I think it's going to be an exciting one because Israel Adesanya just couldn't perform the way he used to. So with that, we're going to break down the whole card and that Israel Adesanya main event. So with that being said, that is this week's weigh-in. So we jump right into this one. Spoiler alert, we're just going to spoil it. Israel Adesanya got his behind TKO'd by Joe Pyfer. Now, mind you, Joe Pyfer is really good. And this is another thing we talk about is Joe Pyfer out of Philadelphia, PA, over there with that team they're building a team over there. They got a couple fighters out there that are in the gym with, Joe Pyfer. I believe Sean Brady is one of them, but it's fairly interesting, that Joe Pyfer making the noise. So if we get on along and break down this card for you. Let's break it down. Tricka. Nah, y'all, we're gonna get into this. So we're gonna get on to the preliminaries. The preliminaries, we had Masvidal versus Ignacio. Tofik. Ignacio lost. Then we had Chase Hopper and Lance Gibson Jr. Lance Gibson Jr. won. That was a TKO. First one was a decision. Then we had a heavyweight bout with Tyrell Fortune against Marcin Tybura. Tyrell Fortune won by decision. Then we had Casey O'Neill and Gabriela Fernandez. Casey O'Neill won by TKO. We had Navarro Sterling versus Bruno Lopez. Navarro Sterling won. Ricky Simon versus Adrian Yankees. It was a draw. So they got no winner in that bantamweight. And we had Alexia Thurania versus Brina Brazil. Alexia won. Women's strawweight by decision. That's all I got for you on that assumption. Let's get on this main card. We had Terrence McKinney versus Kyle Nelson. Terrence McKinney won by TKO. KO/TKO in round one. We had Mansoon Abdul Malik versus Yuri Bagagori. Uzuri won. TKO/KO round three. We had Julian A. Rosa versus Uran Douglas. Douglas won. KO/TKO round one. We had Michael Chelsea versus Nico Price. Welterweight. Michael Chelsea won submission round one. We had Alexia Grasso versus Macy Barber. TKO, KO round one. Alexia Grasso won that. Now, this Israel Adesanya, Joe Pyfer. We know that Joe Pyfer TKO got it done. Why we're back here at this again is because Israel Adesanya's career is really done. I know a lot of you might not agree with me on that, but it's done. He's just getting beat. And I think his peaking time, his prime time is over. For Israel Adesanya, it's over, and it is now the Joe Pyfer time because Joe Pyfer is 16-3, and I do see Joe Pyfer getting a belt because Joe Pyfer was not that high up on the food chain for that fight with Israel Adesanya. I have it here. I'm going to pull it up for you right now. Joe Pyfer did what he had to do, and I will give you how it is. So you can properly hear this for how it is. So Israel Adesanya was the number 4 ranked middleweight, while Joe Pyfer was the 14, a whole 10 up, and Joe Pyfer got it done. That's what I'm talking about, that at this point, Israel Adesanya is... A lot of people aren't going to agree with me when I say this, but he's a McGregor. He's a Conor McGregor, not in terms of trouble. I want to say that. I want to make it clear. But in terms of, okay, you came up, you talked your talk, that, oh, nobody can beat me. I'm the style bender. I'm the last, I'm the last style bender, that kind of mentality. There it is. That kind of mentality. And for me, when I see that, I'm like, all right, great. You're up there. But now that you've been humbled 5 or 6 times, you're just not the way you used to be. You're not sharp. You're not tight like you used to be. In a lot of his fighting forms, it's just not like it used to be. And he was doing good on Joe Pyfer. He was putting a number in on Pyfer. Don't get me wrong. I thought Israel Adesanya was doing good for what he was doing, but his mistake was he let it get to the ground, and Joe Pyfer just controlled all of that. Joe Pyfer, I'm pretty sure this was brought up. Joe Pyfer is a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. So Joe Pyfer is a black belt who is really good at what he does, and tore up Israel Adesanya because Israel Adesanya decided it was a good idea to let a fight with a guy like Joe Pyfer go to the ground. That's something I would have never said you do. You don't let a fight with a guy like Joe Pyfer go to the ground and then expect that it's going to end well for you. It just isn't. You just don't do that. And I guess Israel Adesanya thought it was, you just don't let something like that go to the ground. And I mean, I get it. At some point, you don't mean to let it happen, but when you expose yourself and you get taken down, there's just nothing you can really do. And that's why I say, that's on Adesanya. You cannot expose yourself. Like Conor McGregor. We all know Conor McGregor had no wrestling defense. No offense to Conor McGregor, but he had no wrestling defense. Khabib took him down. It was so many guys that thought they were going to take him down. Conor Mendez thought he was going to take him down, but most notably Khabib and Nate Diaz submitted him. Connor's problem was he had no defense here. Israel Adesanya talked about, oh, I can stand up with these guys. You let a guy like Joe Pyfer, who's got very good power in his hand, he packs a punch, take you down, that's going to be the end of the fight. Joe Pyfer has submits on his MMA record. That's why I sit here and I really feel like Adesanya, I just feel like Adesanya wasn't typical Adesanya because you let Joe Pyfer take you to the ground and then you let him control it. As soon as Pyfer went to the ground, it was all Joe Pyfer. There was Adesanya had no chance. No chance whatsoever to even try and maybe figure it out. No, Joe Pyfer had him done. Joe Pyfer just ended Adesanya, and that's why I say it's his career done. Yeah, we've been to this conversation before. We keep saying it. Adesanya's career is fairly over. At this point, you lost to Joe Pyfer. You're just not. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he bumped up too many weight classes. Go ahead and start cutting weight because it's not, if you can't beat Joe Pyfer, you know, Pyfer's really good. Joe Pyfer's really good. And at this point, if you can't figure out how to beat Joe Pyfer or how to, if you can't figure out how to simply get through guys that, that are, Joe Pyfer's tough. He packs a punch. But Adesanya used to be able to really take a lot. You can't take a lot no more. And you're going to be sloppy and let somebody take you down like the way Joe Pyfer did, and you're going to be sloppy. Then at that point, I don't know what to tell you, but having a UFC bout is not going to be there. You're definitely not going to be holding no UFC nothing. The way Adesanya's fighting. Mm-mm. I saw that and I was like, what? You know, I saw that and was like, it just ain't unbelievable. Unbelievable that Israel Adesanya couldn't get it done. I just didn't feel that Adesanya was in his. Now, I felt like he was, he was doing everything correctly, but I feel like as it went through, I feel like Adesanya got sloppy because round one, I felt like that was a solid Adesanya. No matter who got what round, I felt like it was a solid Adesanya. I was like, okay, Israel looks solid. I liked how it was progressing, but it was round two where I kind of felt like he wasn't as strong as round one. For those who don't understand, Joe Pyfer's takedown was as solid as it comes. So if I could explain to you that Joe Pyfer takedown, because I'm gonna explain it for you, is that Joe Pyfer was doing a number on him and was really just breaking him down at that point. And we talked about this before on the podcast. It was a stacked heavy. We talked about this before that when you load up your punches, when you backload your punches, that you put yourself in vulnerability. And he loaded up a right that Joe Pyfer saw coming, and Joe Pyfer dipped and got his back. And then Adesanya tried to turn towards the front, but it was too late. Joe Pyfer was in close and got the takedown. That's why I'm saying it was a sloppy right. It was sloppy because Joe Pyfer saw it coming. If Joe Pyfer didn't see that right coming, he wasn't gonna take him down. He saw the right coming and it was sloppy. It was so sloppy, and that's why Joe Pyfer was able to get the takedown because it was a sloppy punch. It was sloppy right hand thrown by Israel Adesanya. And you can't used to be a UFC champion. You got to be, like I said, you have to be tight with your punches. You can't be sloppy. It was a sloppy right, and I felt like Israel Adesanya could have done better, been a little more selective, tried to make sure that he was not doing what he did, them sloppy punches. That's just how I feel with that. I feel like that was a sloppy punch by Israel Adesanya, and I feel like for Adesanya, he could have done better, and that's kind of why he lost. I feel like had he not made that mistake, first of all, I think either way, Joe Pyfer was doing the right thing. He was getting the body figure for and to basically almost get a rear naked choke, which I felt like Joe Pyfer could have done that too. You could have tapped him, and you look at with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, you typically do not want to go to the ground with guys like that. You know, you typically don't want to be on the ground with a guy like Joe Pyfer because he's very dangerous when he stands up, and he's dangerous on bottom too. So Joe Pyfer is one of those guys that you just have to be very selective in how you punch, and you have to kind of you got to kind of you have to kind of fight it like it's kickboxing almost. You got to kind of box it very well, and you got to put other combinations in there enough to throw Joe Pyfer off his game. And Israel Adesanya just didn't have it. Now I'll give him credit. I thought that first round, I thought it was a good first round for Adesanya. I thought great. I thought that was a good first round. But that second round, when Joe Pyfer started to get in his power punches, he started to break down Adesanya. Adesanya started to break down. Israel Adesanya couldn't handle it. He started to break down, slowly breaking down. And that's why he threw that sloppy right hook, because Joe Pyfer was already breaking him down. He was, in my defense, Israel Adesanya was hurt. He was hurt when he threw that right, which was very sloppy. And why he should have tried to, recover himself a little bit, but he went in there with a right to try to hopefully stun Joe Pyfer, and Joe Pyfer got in to be able to get a takedown. You know, you just can't do things like that if you're Adesanya. You can't put yourself, when you're coming into this Joe Pyfer fight, where I bet you Adesanya was probably thinking like, oh, I'll be able to get through Joe Pyfer. Oh, I can beat him, But you didn't. And it's kind of like, I say this all the time. You can't underestimate an opponent. You have, because me, I don't. When I was in my wrestling, I didn't. I believed everybody I got across the mat against could beat me. And it's the same thing. You got to believe this guy could knock me out. There's no way this guy beats me. That's exactly what happened to Jose Aldo and McGregor. Jose Aldo did not believe McGregor could beat him. Everybody said, wait till Jose Aldo gets him. None of us can beat Jose Aldo. Wait till Jose Aldo. He's going to tear him up. Jose Aldo refused to believe that McGregor could beat him. And had Jose Aldo believed that McGregor could beat him, he wouldn't have, what I felt was overtrained himself to the point where he was too tight. He wasn't loose enough to be relaxed. He wasn't relaxed. He was stiff. And that's what happened. He pack loaded a punch stiff and he got beat. That's just things that I talk about, is that, for Adesanya, you don't got to be stiff. That's a better word, stiff. You don't got to be stiff. You could be a little more loose. You got to be loose when you're in there. You got to be a little loose, and that's why I felt like Adesanya did. And I already told you Adesanya's career was descending at this point. And then you lose to Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer is great. Joe Pyfer is good. Joe Pyfer is really good. But Joe Pyfer, if you ask me, I know I didn't break this down for the pod beforehand, but I believe Joe Pyfer was going to win that fight. Joe Pyfer is way better than Adesanya, because Joe Pyfer has been humbled. Joe Pyfer's not undefeated. Joe Pyfer's lost, and he knows that he doesn't want to lose again. Joe Pyfer is 16-3. Israel Adesanya is 24-6. Like, why are you still getting in these fights and you're stiffening up and you're throwing lousy punches against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt? Well, you don't want to be on the ground with those guys. At some point, you say Adesanya did it to himself. And you can't even really because you look at, let me tell you how that first round went. Adesanya got 39 total strikes. 39 total strikes in that first round, to Joe Pyfer's 9. And Joe Pyfer got 1 takedown. So, like, like I said, although for me, I felt it was a good round for Adesanya, tough round for Adesanya. This is what I'm saying. Adesanya, had no takedown defense. Adesanya did the best he could, but Adesanya, this is what I'm talking about. A lot of these guys think, if I stand up, I can kickbox. I don't need wrestling defense. No, it got because now you got guys in the UFC like Joe Pyfer who who are submitting guys left and right. You need wrestling defense. That's why Bo Nickel thrives so well in MMA. These wrestlers that come over, look at. I'm curious to know the statistic on this, and we're gonna find it. We're gonna find it because I'm sure it's a big statistic. I'm gonna look it up now. And I'm gonna get you an answer. 40% of UFC all-time title holders have a background in collegiate wrestling, college wrestling. Let me let me let me run you some of these names so you can understand. Uh Brock Lesnar, Daniel Cormier, Cain Vasquez, Randy Couture, John Jones, Mark Coleman, um, Kevin Randleman, Johnny Hendrick, Chris Weidman, Henry Cejudo. Most of which are national champions. Daniel Cormier was an All American. Chris Weidman is from Hofstra, All American. Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo. This is Henry Cejudo is one that he's on this list. He was not a college wrestler, but he was an Olympic gold medalist. Still, a huge wrestling background. Ben Askren, you got Kobe Covington on here. This is what I'm talking about. That a lot of these wrestlers that are coming, wrestlers thrive in MMA. You got Tyrone Woodley. And many of you don't know, Tyrone Woodley was a college wrestler. So let's see. John Jones won the 2006 NJCAA National Championship at 197 pounds for Iowa Central Community College. Wow. He was a 2005 New York State champ at Union Endicott High School. Wow. And then for a period in time, he was an assistant coach at Ithaca. Wow. So even John Jones has got that wrestling background. And Kobe Covington and John Jones, if all you want to know, they were college teammates. Wow. Let's fact check that one because I saw it and I want to fact check it. it gets even further. John Jones and Kobe Covington were roommates at Iowa Central Community College. That should tell you. This is what I'm saying for these guys like Israel Adesanya, Conor McGregor, and I'm sure there's more out there. You need takedown defense. About 40% of your UFC champions were wrestlers. I'm curious to how many UFC fighters, what's the percentage for just fighters? Over 70%. Over 70% over the years of UFC have had a wrestling background. If that doesn't tell you need takedown defense, then I don't know what does. You know, and that's exactly. Let's see about Joe. And even Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer wrestled in high school. He went to Arthur P. Patrick Shellac High School in New Jersey. Starting in the 10th grade, Pyfer began training jiu-jitsu. So even Pyfer's got that wrestling in him. This is what I'm talking. You need takedown defense. That's just the best. That's the best thing I could say. It's just you can't go through MMA and expect, okay, I'm gonna shoot lousy. I'm gonna shoot lousy and allow myself to get taken down while I knowingly know that I should be that what I shouldn't be doing, what I should and shouldn't be doing is I shouldn't be allowing myself to go to the ground with a guy like Joe Pyfer, but I should be trying to defend takedown. So that's just kind of why I think this that Joe Pyfer did all the right things, and Israel Adesanya just got broken down because when you go to the ground, it's tiring. It's tiring to be on the ground. It's tiring to have a figure four locked in. That's how he got TKO. The figure four was locked in. He was cinching the figure four. We practically could have rear naked choked Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya kept defending. As soon as he gave up his back, Pyfer started wailing and just one too many punches, and referee stopped it. But this is what I'm talking about. Israel Adesanya should have never let himself get taken down to begin with. I get he was stunned, but take a step back. Try to catch yourself before throwing a lousy punch and getting taken down. Because it's fairly simple. So for Joe Pyfer, I think it's only up from here, for Joe Pyfer. Because if you're Joe Pyfer, you did all the right things. If you're Joe Pyfer, you did all the right things. If you're Joe Pyfer, so middleweight. So let's see who the current middleweight champion is. Let's see here. This comes out Chumayev. No, that's Hamza. That's Katsira. Chep Naveed. Chip Naviv. Yeah, I think it's Katsura Chip Naviv. Either way, listen, with Hamza Chimaev and Katsura Chip Naviv, they're great fighters. They're tough to beat. So I would like to see it, but you got Strict Duplessis, who could get up there against Naviv. In the middleweight, you got Joe Pyfer at 6 now. That's right. So I would say let Strickland get a fight in there. Let Duplessis get a fight. Brendan Allen is some good names up there. Anthony Hernandez is a name up there. Renier D. Ryder's up. You know what? Let's get Renier D. They probably have already faced. Let's take a look at Joe Pyfer. Who Joe Pyfer's fight history is. Now let's get Joe Pyfer. 10 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 7 by first round finish. Let me bring this up here. Let's get Joe Pyfer, Renier D. Ryder, or Joe Pyfer, Strict Duplessis. Let's test Joe Pyfer here. You know, we got a good Joe Pyfer, you know. But nonetheless, we're in the end of the epi. But I just wanted to break that down today. As you know, NCAA wrestling is now done, so we're on to the strict focus of this. Not strict focus, but we're on to this MMA stuff, and we're going to continue to watch that. So now it's going to be able to put a little bit on this because, you know, I needed to double down. You know, I needed to make sure I was a 2-timer. I didn't want to go ahead and lose that overall title. So I focused on that wrestling. Now that is finished, and I'm now a 2-timer, 2-time draft champion for the weigh-in, I will continue. But now we're getting on to our MMA. And, you know, I will try to every now and then get your videos updating the schedule because I don't want you to miss stuff like this where I don't let you know there's good fights like this, Adesanya Pyfer, and you miss it because I forgot to announce it. So, you know, I want to make sure you're watching when I'm watching, you know, so we all can understand this fight game together. But with that being said, this is the Weigh-In Podcast by Benoit Chestnut and the occasional Pop-In Sebastian Romero. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share the Weigh-In. That is all I got for you. Weigh-In out.
The Weigh-In, where stories ignite by Benoit Chestnut.